I love that painting. This is Alexander Cabanel. My father liked it too. Look at this face. There are many images of this type, but this one is perfect. As a famous Scottish actor once told me, God's favorite son. He really originally called him by a word that can be translated as son. He cries, but the question is how he cries. They say he'll cry once. When the apocalypse is about to come. Out of sadness that he will lose his kingdom. Yes, I remember that photo. Right before the so-called pandemic. The clouds seemed to form that face. I think it was redone. Lucifer. Well, the fact is that the morning star began to be called only by the fathers of the church. How it is actually with Lucifer. Everything is God's will, but he has his own kingdom. He seems to be a separate entity, but he creates God's will. He is still an angel of justice. No one took that role away from him. In the Orthodox Church, you can pray to Lucifer and also for Lucifer's soul. To reduce sinfulness on earth through prayer for salvation of his soul, and to him for justice and a higher good. I guess we'll deal with the greater good later. Politic loves higher good. This is heresy in Catholicism. We will also probably tell the truth about the Druze and their book. Indeed, the religions of the book have a problem with him, and all because the first religion of the book and its book, the Avesta, have been forgotten. At some point in history, Judaism began to change its dogmas. It removed the God's wife from worship and perhaps, purely for political reasons, began to create monotheism. Many believe that after meeting Akhenaten. After all, Jacob was at his court. The hymn to the Athon is found in the Bible. In this way, a problem was created that has not been solved to this day, and the more someone tried to strengthen this monotheism, the more he contradicted himself and stepped on a mine. This affects all the religions of the book. For in the Avesta, the book of the Zoroastrians, or Mazdaism, or if you prefer the fire worshippers, we have dualism. There is good Ahura Mazda and Angra Mainyu. Yan and Yin. Order has been broken, that's for sure. Yes, they also had side gods, which they removed or turned into so-called saints. Unfortunately, there is such a thing as the Slavic Avesta. It was a translation created by the Nazi movements in Slavic countries to prove the origin of the Zoroastrians. The text itself is quite cleverly translated and footnotes are created in such a way that you can really think that the Slavs are the chosen people. No, the Avesta is the book of the Persians. The original text says nothing about bringing the Slavs to the top. Unfortunately, even a popular online encyclopedia writes about this heritage. About taking anyone away. Yes, it was the war with this religion that caused Islam not to like dogs. There's even a theory for it. However, there is nothing in the Quran about this. It was a political thing. The Zoroastrians worshipped dogs and used them to fight the Muslims when they came to conquer their lands. They were the symbol of this religion. Unfortunately, everyone has forgotten why dogs became politicized, and then it became a dogma. Wretched dogma. Nothing about Aryans either. This name was invented in the 18th century. The Germans also used the Aist. They keep using it. Probably the most dangerous book of all book religions, though the simplest and most understandable. Someone wise told me that there is light in darkness and dreams in hell. If demons did not dream of saving souls and getting to heaven, it could not exist. There is light in the darkness. Trust me, different, but is. You just have to see them. Hell and paradise are only relative. It's a matter of approach. Hell contains paradise, and paradise contains hell. By mesuaring desires we create own paradise or hell for ourselves. It would be better not to order, but that's not human nature. Emperor Cao Cao. You are at a crossroads. You meet two angels. One is Lucifer and the other is the guardian angel. They look identical because Lucifer took the form of a guardian angel. Who are you asking for the road? Fast. Who's? Lucifer, and you do exactly the opposite of what he told you. This is a famous British theological puzzle. Lucifer meets at the crossroads. He takes off our masks. It doesn't have to be in this country. Stalin was right about them. I agree with him in that. They needn't demon to guard in hell because look after themselves in hell. They speak faster than think. Their masks fall too fast. He shows your true nature. It's never nice. However, he is an angel and what he says always has a deeper meaning. Again, this is a shot in the foot of religion. resulting from the change to monotheism. Lucifer cannot be erased, because without him religions make no sense. It is he who helps to distinguish good from evil. If he wasn't there, you wouldn't. Of course, the question of what is really good and what is bad. From the perspective of human nature, not social standards. God's story is the devil's story. Without the devil, the religions of the book make no sense. It also doesn't make sense the way we see our world. How else would we know what is good and what is bad? We don't even realize it started right then. But it is the most paradoxical story in history. It is said that he is an implacable enemy of God, and at the same time his faithful servants. It works with his permission. Lucifer can become as powerful as God himself, but the penalty for doing so is the loss of divine love. Lucifer does evil, but since he is the doer, God is to blame. Angels had wives. You can read about it in the book of Genesis. Initially, there was nothing wrong with this tradition. This approach has changed over time. It was the cohabitation of angels with the daughters of men that led to the destruction of Noah's world and to the death of mankind. Succubi have indeed existed in our tradition long before Merlin. Book of Jubilees. It is really an expanded repetition of Genesis and Exodus. It is from it that we learn about the hierarchy and the creation of angels. War with Lucifer looking chronologically in the Bible. It only takes place after Noah's death, and the serpent is by no means Lucifer. Only after these texts can we read something about demons, but we do not yet know who they are. Their leader is Mastema. It is only by delving into the text that it is discovered that it was Noah who advised God to imprison the demons, and they are none other than succubi. This is also a paradox. Man commands God here. God agrees to this proposal, but Mastema asks God not to imprison all demons, because only thanks to them can he test people. The leaders in the book begin to arrive over time: Semihaza, Lucifer, Azazel, Mastema, Belial. The Bible can't decide. The word Satan itself was originally not a name, because it literally means accuser, adversary. This is a description of Mastema's role towards God. This word is used not only for Lucifer. How did that word become a name? You could say Lucifer worked. It's no secret that Hebrew is a difficult language because it doesn't write vowels. They are inserted from memory. If you don't know the meaning of the text, you can make a mistake. The translation of the Bible at first into Greek, this version is the Septuagint, and then the Vulgate, were taken by people who had little to do with Hebrew. And so the term became a name. The New Testament does not make things easier, because it uses the word written in lowercase and uppercase letters alternately. The ancient serpent is finally knocked down, but again we do not know in what context the word Satan is used. Worse, he was cast down for 1,000 years. So he may not be in this hell for a long time. To make it even weirder, the Apocalypse tries to imply, which is actually logical if you look at Christian dogma, that Satan was cast to hell only after Jesus left. In one, both books agree. This fall has brought the face of this world as it is. Satan's association with the serpent and his fall is actually the Apocalypse. The text in the Torah is completely different. There is one more curiosity that will probably hurt those who consider themselves better than animals. Man was created to tend the garden, and birds and animals to accompany him. There's nothing about be-ruler here. Anyway, in the text about management, the word management was used. Completely different meaning. To rule is not to manage. Giving up power would be a renunciation of the most important divine function. People, however, by misinterpretation, have claimed power over the world that no one has given them. We have become accustomed to this tradition as well as to being cast into hell, but horror of it because we do not read the Holy Book in its entirety. Only in the 2nd century did the philosopher Justin Martyr turn the serpent into Satan. It's not even a Thorah or Gospel text. He also interjects that the fallen tried to imitate the sovereign will of God. One might be tempted to say that since the devil, like all angels, had free will, he chose evil himself. This is a convenient theory because it tells us that a being created to be good made that decision. Free will is a very interesting thing in the Bible. It's supposed to be, but we often find out that it isn't. Why then did Jesus not change his mind? Perhaps, finally, we should mention the text known as the life of Adam and Eve, which has nothing to do with the Bible or even the Apocrypha. It was built between the 2nd and 5th centuries. He was so popular that his translations were published all over the world in the Baroque era. It was he who influenced the vision of the fall of Lucifer, also in the Quran. People took for a dogma something that had nothing to do with the Holy Book. This is where we finally have that legendary rebellion. It is in this literary work that God wanted to force the angels to worship Adam, and Lucifer rebelled, because he decided that his wisdom and nature surpassed human. Their text is also lost. He considers angels to be higher beings, because it is a dogma, and suddenly a higher being has to worship a lower being. Lucifer was one of the wisest archangels. Lord of justice. No wonder that he's questioning the worship. There is no democracy in heaven, that's a fact. Maybe that's a good thing, but at the beginning of the text it's just an expression of opinion, and only then, when Michael wants to force his brother, he rebels. It is from the lives of Adam and Eve, also known as the Apocalypse of Moses, that we learn that Lucifer tempted the serpent. The text is interesting for several reasons. It will make us realize that the snake, in an act of revenge for being banished from paradise, tempted Eve. Interestingly, it can be said that he is the first exile, not Adam and Eve. The reason for his banishment is pride in who he is. Now everyone should be afraid, because there is no nation, no man who does not have at least a grain of pride in who he is. Pride becomes the cause of the fall of Lucifer, and therefore of people. The fall of the devil and his retinue is a consequence of a deliberate and direct rebellion against God, but also provoked, one might say. This is how the well-known concept of the fall was born. However, we will not find it in the Holy Book. It's not even a dogma. It is also in this book that we read that the devil will sit on the throne and create his kingdom. However, there is of course a version that the fall occurred after the creation of the world. It is derived from the book of Isaiah. It is there that we read that pride led to the downfall, because Lucifer wanted to be equal to God. Nothing more. The fathers of the church added theirs. The theologian Origenes dealt with the book of Ezekiel, and mainly with the story of the fall of the king of Tyre, in which Satan appears. It was he who connected Satan with Lucifer. Star of the dawn. This is Luciferian dogma. Satan carried the light before he was cast into the abyss. Origenes lives in an era when Gnostic dualism begins to appear. Where the devil is evil, the opposite demiurge of God. In most of these denominations, the rulers of this world. He tries to prove that beings created as good can become evil due to an excess of free will. It is Origenes who states that the souls of all beings, by no means only humans, were created in heaven and are awaiting their coming into the world. If the soul had not been created originally, where would souls come from? If there were no original sin, there would be no other sins. Interestingly, he goes on to argue that those who sinned greatly became demons, and those who sinned less became angels and least archangels. Had Michael sinned too? Origen also got lost in these considerations. Still, it affirms that God created the world as a place of punishment for sin. From this dogma, confession is by no means necessary. Anyway, it was never needed, but especially in the case of kings it influenced politics like nothing else. Though Christ has defeated the devil, they will ultimately lose their power only after the apocalypse. And here comes the greater good. No spirit being, including the devil and demons, is deprived of the possibility of redemption. Lucifer can also choose good and experience redemption by himself. Sometimes he chooses the good. On the other hand, Origenes points out that the devil is so saturated with evil that he will not choose good by himself, but it is worth praying for the redemption of his soul. This is a dogma that exists in the Orthodox Church. It disappears in Latin, by the time. Quite dangerous, because according to Origenes, de facto free will is not in the hands of God. It is a contradiction between God's will to save people and the evil will of the devil. This is a completely new thread. Though few people realize it. Origenes's belief that Lucifer and the demons will be saved. It didn't find place in the West. In the 2nd century, the dogma began to consolidate. This resulted from the Christian understanding of God as a being embodying goodness. Although everyone emphasized that Longinus was doomed to immortality for piercing the side of Christ, as was Artavarus. However, they could not explain the evil that exists in the world. Mainly because Judaism has already forgotten the Avesta. The doctrine that Satan and demons were created good, but given free will to make decisions and choose between good and evil, perpetuated God's goodness. At the same time, it was in conflict with the real witness, the existence of evil, the location of Lucifer in this story. Still is like that. The rejection of Satan's deliverance had repercussions in the Western Church. It assumed that before the creation of the world there was a being completely evil. In the end it will lead to predestination. There are churches that accept it as dogma. Dangerous in a way, because they contradict each other again. They should not go to heaven and have salvation. In a way, it's an artificial creation. It's like a return to the Avesta, but at the same time we have an independent being and subject to God's will. With time, Judaism also began to acquire the rhetoric of God's generosity, forgetting about Isaac. It created being in opposition to God, or actually the Antichrist. Evil has existed in the world since the beginning of time. Yes, it explains the coming of Christ. However, other texts explained it just as well, and no one dealt with evil. Well, the God that can be understood is not God. The manipulation of the text led to a truly Luciferian Gordian knot. This was by no means any closer to Christ's defeat of the demons, as would be desired. Yeep, Luciferians. Thanks to the series, they moved west and, that worse, in network pages began to appear that they existed here. There was briefly a German sect to which this name was attributed, but it was quickly liquidated. Gnostic sect. We do not know how their names themselves, but theologically they were close to the Cathars. Perhaps it was about the Waldenses, which still exist today. People forget that Gnosticism survived in this cult, and today these people are entitled to their dualistic creed. They live mainly in northern Italy. However, don't be fooled. The Luciferians existed, but only in the east, and they had nothing to do with Templar France. The Templars did fight the Cathars, but not the Luciferians. They influenced the idea of the greater good, which from Byzantium made its way to Florence and was described by Machiavelli. For them, the deity was the morning star, the planet Venus, or Lucifer. Luciferians are not Satanism either. It's actually a new creation. Created by one man. Having nothing to do with the dualistic concept of the Cathars, Waldensians, known generally as Albigensians or Luciferians. Although there is created a long history of it on the internet, no, I would say that Luciferianism greatly distorted the ability to pray to and for Lucifer. In fact, this current sees only the temporal world and Lucifer. Luciferianism did not recognize that evil as such exists. And as we shall see, in some religions it has survived. Occultism has always gone hand in hand with religion, though this is by far the strongest in Judaism and Islam. In his book on Judas, Peter Stanford published statistics on Christian knowledge, symbolism, dogma, traditions, and how they change. Various Christian denominations were asked. It's bad. It's safe to say that people don't even know what Christmas is for. This also explains why so many yelled at the release of Green Knight that Gawain had a pentagram. No one has returned what type of pentagram it was because it is white and black. Apart from the fact that this is an extremely boring adaptation of this poem and too much sex in it, but not the whole story, but when the name of this woman appeared, it was already known that it will be like that. This marriage has the most to offer in this sphere, worse than other acting shortcomings. Goetheia has, in a sense, always existed. Already in Judaism. Solomon, again a translation error, collaborated with demons. They cannot be commanded. At least a man with a ring can't. Its meaning was distorted over time when a book called Goetheia appeared, printed. I guess they can read it. Assuming someone else is reading. They will certainly look on the internet, not the library, and read nonsense, or worse, they will fly to some religious fanatic, not a theologian or religious studies scholar who will want to translate. Unfortunately, religion is scarcely still after secondary school and college. Solomon's seal is closely related to Goetheia. In fact, it was the Europeans who stuck this symbol on the Jews as a sign of their nation. The meaning of this sign is completely different. It is the unity of the macrocosm and the microcosm. The symbol of the universe. The first persecutor of Hermeticism, the so-called magic and other religious concepts was Charlemagne. The same one that made deals with the Muslims of Al-Andalus. This legendary poem may describe a battle that happened 2 centuries later, for there were 2 encounters between the Muslims and the Franks here. This was the greatest damage he had done to the church. By no means he didn't want to fight Muslims. These he needed to fight for Byzantium. It was politic. Lucifer is definitely not a goat. There is no reference to the goat anywhere in the Bible, but it has become a permanent fixture. In fact, turning into a monster is mentioned by John, who, admittedly, had a huge imagination. Here we have to reflect a bit to the ancient religion of the Celts, which was reborn Wicca. With the passing of the ages, it was made satanic because it used the white pentagram. Wicca is the complete opposite of Satanism and is hostile to it. It is a remnant of the Celtic religion. Mystical pantheism, based on respect for the natural world. It anthropomorphizes these forces with gods and goddesses, and this has led to the Church's fueled identification with Satanism, although in the beginning the Church was not disturbed by the white pentagram. It is already a philosophical truism that the previous gods must become demons in the new religion, or take at least a lower place. At the same time, their traits are absorbed by the new cult. In the past, Astarte was the star of the sea. Today it is one of the cults associated with Mary. Lilith has become a demon. She was too liberated. She did not fit the concept of woman in the Middle Ages. Astarte changed sex and became Astoreth. There were many deities with horns in Europe. During the Roman Saturnalia, priests dressed up as fawns. This holiday was so difficult to eradicate that the Latin Church decided to introduce Christmas on this day. Cernunnos didn't make it easy. Especially him, because Wicca is close to Christianity in many ways. And so the horned deity became a symbol of unbridled potency. During Saturnalia, orgies were normal, which is why it was so difficult to get rid of them from Rome, which was the mainstay of promiscuity, bestiality and injustice. Of course, this does not mean that the satanic cult was not beginning to emerge, but they were looking for it in the wrong place. The early Christians not only had no established theology, they were indeed fanatics. They took it all too serious, especially since 4th century. For them, sin was from the beginning much more important than for a Buddhist. The descriptions of the baptisms of various countries are very beautiful, but not true. Even if someone outside the court was baptized, the villagers continued to worship the old gods. It takes at least 2 centuries for a new religion to take root. Now historians says that Joan of Arc's voices had more to do with Wicca rituals than speech of saints. The most perfect absorption of the old cult is the Holy Grail. We all know this story. The Green Knight is none other than the deity of vegetation and fertility. Under Gregory of Tours, the bells will not only measure time, but drive away demons. I would stay with the old dogma. Very handsome man surrounded by light. The modern Satanism is a really new creation, although this dualism has always been there. It was founded in 1966 by a rather strange man, Howard Stanton Levy, who changed his name to Anton Shander Lavie. In fact, he was a charlatan who held various jobs. However, he was lucky. He was born in America, and America accepts every religious novelty uncritically. As long as what is called a church pays the tax. Whether or not it really is a church no longer matters to anyone. America is a breeding ground for sects. In some part is really possible to agree with him, because like every man of that type he sometimes speak truth. And as is usually the case in history, he was a Jew and a Freemason. Unfortunately, this is often the case and there is no denying it. Rather, according to Lavie, Satan is a dark, hidden force of nature responsible for the course of earthly affairs, a force that neither science nor religion can explain, the spirit of progress, the inspirer of all the great movements that have contributed to the development of civilization and the progress of mankind, the spirit of rebellion leading to freedom and the embodiment of all heresies that lead to liberation. It is true that the diabolical led to the transformation of the world and giving it a new face. With the rest, no philosopher will agree, because there is no such thing as freedom. I guess Lucifer was the last free spirit, because when people started to establish states and create laws, they lost it. They don't even realize it. There are also family and work connotations. In a sense, we serve someone all our lives. He used the Enochian language invented by D. Special, supposedly the language of the angels, and wrote the Satanic Bible. It should be noted here that Vodou or Muti are not considered satanic cults, and the ancient African ones, although certainly the author was partly inspired by them. It should also be noted that in the original Satanism there is no blood sacrifice, but only your own. Menstrual blood is popular. Interestingly, Satanism was for fidelity, and modern Satanism firmly prohibits pedophilia and zoophilia. Especially the latter, considering it a disgusting perversion, because it is incompatible with biology. It is not compatible with biology, although there are probably those who try to make it so. In the animal world, mating between different species is not possible. The artificial admission of a lion to a tiger is still a matter of the same family species, felines. So we can say openly that Scandinavia and recently Spain, which probably comes as no surprise to anyone, because it has always been famous for the most bloody and brutal tastes in this matter, are worse than Satanists. It's no secret that this is a paradise for such excesses. The Germans were not saints in this matter either. I doubt that 20 years of the ban will remove bestiality. They will surely remain this paradise for a long time. Despite this, marches of zoophiles to their freedom in Germany took place quite recently. And somehow the groups fighting for animal rights and the environment were not there. If a high-ranking female politician makes a movie that looks like porn while drunk, and her subjects rave about her boobs, instead of overthrowing her, if only for simply ridiculing the state. Despite this, marches of zoophiles to their freedom in Germany took place quite recently. And somehow the groups fighting for animal rights and the environment were not there. We have masks, but we don't need bras. They protect life, and if they rape us, it's obviously the men's fault. It's hard to call this is a typical environment of nihilism. Satanism also does not accept serial killers. Members of the Temple of Set, a branch of Satanism that has nothing to do with the ancient Brotherhood of Set, claim that magic is dangerous and that their practice elevates them above other religions. However, they want to stay within the law, so they dissociate themselves from human or animal sacrifice or having sex with children. Yazidis should be mentioned. They also became famous thanks to one lady who yelled insults at the rapist. This worked wonderfully for the women of the West, but the ones from the East saw it as a rather shunned Caden trying to get something. The truth is that in this situation and the assumptions of Islam, this lady should not come back alive. Yazidis are not loved by any religion. On the web you can read that it is a monotheistic religion. At least not so if you delve into her books. In religious studies books, it is a dualistic religion. However, the element of let's say the bad side has been greatly exalted here. The biggest problem with this religion is that there is no hell and no evil. Every deed is good. This is an extremely dangerous view, because what is happening, however, operates on the principle that we can do anything, but evil is done to us. Yazidis do not have a sophisticated sense of evil, unlike other religions. You can often read that by Shaitan being the name of one of the main deities. Other religions have distorted the guiding principle of this religion. The conflicts were not about the name at all, but about the whole of theology. The Yazidis believe that they descend from the eldest descendant of Adam, and all the rest of humanity from his younger descendants. For this reason, the Yazidis believe that they are God's chosen people. 8. Followers of Yazidism practice prayer 5 times a day facing the sun, worshipping sacred trees, sacrificing bulls, circumcision, and baptism. They believe in the transmigration of the soul, reincarnation, to successive bodily forms and that, thanks to continuous rebirth, gradual purification is possible, making hell redundant. The faithful are forbidden to eat certain foods, lettuce, pumpkin, gazelle meat, and wear navy blue clothes, and women are also forbidden to cut their hair. The ban on eating lettuce is probably due to the similarity of its name to the name of one of the angels. They recognize Abraham and Muhammad as prophets, and Jesus as an angel in the form of a man. From September 15 to 20, they make an annual pilgrimage to the tomb of Sheikh Adi in Lalish, where they perform ritual ablutions in the river. They venerate the Bible and the Quran. This is where most of the argument ends, so that no one will ever look at the other 2 books. Kitab al-Jilwa, Book of Revelation, and Mashafrash, Black Book. Especially the second book contains very extreme views on the planets, including the Earth, which they respect to such an extent that they strictly forbid spitting so as not to defile it. Breaking of divine laws is expiated by way of metempsychosis, or transmigration of souls, which allows for the progressive purification of the spirit. This is dogma of occultism. Of course, this is not a religion older than Islam or Christianity. You can read something like that in the articles written by the followers of the religious trend. Their books were published really late, in the 20th century. The authenticity of both books is not confirmed because the Yazidis simply do not want research into their religion. The older religion is Yarsanism. Often confused with Yezites. The Yarzanis do not curse Satan. The Yarzanis of the Kermanshah region use the name Malek Tavis, i.e., the peacock angel, which is also used by the older Yarsani texts, to designate Satan. The book discusses cosmogony, the creation of humanity, history of the Yazidis and prohibitions in regard to food, deeds and pronunciation of words. The book begins with cosmogony and continues with how God created the white pearl out of his most precious essence. He also created the bird Angar. God placed the white pearl on the back of this bird, and he dwelt on it for 40,000 years. 3. The book moreover states that the first day of creation was Sunday, which contradicts oral traditions that claims that the first day of creation was a Saturday. God created Tawusi Melik on Sunday, on Monday he created Sheikh Hassan or Dardal, on Tuesday he created Sheikh Shams al-Din or Israfil, on Wednesday he created Sheikh Abu Bakr or Mikhail, on Thursday he created Sajjad al-Din or Azrael, on Friday he created Nasir al-Din or Shamnail, and on Saturday he created Yadin, Far al-Din, also known as Narail. The book then states that God Melik Taus is the ruler of them all, and God then moved on to create 7 heavens, the earth, the sun and the moon. Then, Yadin created humans, animals, birds and beasts which God put in a pocket of cloth which would come out accompanied by these 7 angels. The book also mentions Gabriel, Adam, and Eve. This does not change the fact that the holy peacock was indeed cast down to hell, only tears flooded it. Yazidis, because they are mostly Kurds, have had limited access to education for years. Due to the lack of literary awareness, having the ability to read by a select few, most did not realize what they believed in. Now it changed. The books of Revelation has more mysterious story. When foreigners began studying Yazidis in the 1850s, they believed that the Yazidis had sacred books and thus tried to find them. While Yazidis do have sacred books as attested in their oral traditions, it was not known whether they were kept secret in a Yazidi home or burned during massacres. Copies of the Yazidi Book of Revelation were found in the 1880s, and a number of copies purporting to be authentic circulated in Iraq from the late 19th century to the early 20th century. Assyrian Jeremiah Shamir, a former monk and known manuscript dealer from Ankawa, was seemingly implicated in this affair. A translation of the Yazidi Book of Revelation and Yazidi Black Book was translated by Alpheus Andrus in 1891, and later by Edward Granville Brown in 1895. Translations were also made by R. Y. Ebed, M. J. L. Young and Isia Joseph. Joseph claimed that his translation was made from the original Kurdish book which he had discovered. Alphonse Mingana asserted in 1916 that all hitherto translations were based on inauthentic documents. He moreover states that Shamir could have been the author of the Yazidi Book of Revelation. Yazidis themselves knew of the books before Western interest that began in the 1850s, but the vast majority of them had never seen them. However, the presence of a textual Black Book and Book of Revelation alone may be enough to alter the Yazidi religion to become more consistent and coherent across villages. This is due in part to the rising literacy rate among Yazidis, such that those who can read or write hold a more esteemed position, and the written word is treated as more valid than the oral tradition. However much one would like to defend the Yazidis, their theology is related to Satan, although many will go to great lengths to deny it. It is this mysterious theology that causes the rejection of Islam and Judaism. The darkest religion remains. Wauwenberg Castle. Of course, the location of the famous occult hall was consciously chosen by Hitler. It was from this castle that Luther wrote his theses, and in fact there was more politics in it than his religiosity. Protestants, of course, see it differently. However, they were not saints. They also burned at the stake. The religion of the SS remains a mystery to this day. Stone circles and many occult references. Right, more like concrete circles, but circles. One thing is certain, the elite had their deities. Yes, Hitler, like Stalin, was a Freemason, but he got out of control. He would not have come to this position without the Masonic Lodge. Legends say he worshipped the demon Zafar, and he must be fed. They are, of course, legends. This does not change the fact that Wauenberg was an SS temple and the symbolism there is unambiguous. Yin Master dreams of eternity. Although it is fantasy and different from the book, this movie perfectly showed the principle of power regarding Lucifer. You can negate his existence, but when it comes down to he is the one who takes off the masks and cleans up. You can say that he is such a heavenly lord of doing dirty work. Okay, but we're translating theology for people who are very ignorant on the subject. I'm sure he'd be offended by the comparison. I don't think Lucifer lost by his pride, more knowledge. Scientists often are to pride. In fact, if you look at the world, nothing had been lost him. If anything has lost him, it's human nature. He exists to show the true nature of man. He takes off his masks. That's why he has become such a powerful taboo. He shows everything that is in line with human nature, the real one, not distorted by the social system, and at the same time dangerous, because he shows that social norms imposed by the authorities have little to do with human nature. And let him take off those masks as long as possible. There is a reason why the Pater Noster says, "Lead us not into temptation." Nobody wondered why. We are pawns in their game. Yan and Yin Master. Without one, we wouldn't recognize the other. There would be no knowledge of what is good and what is bad. Maybe it would be easier, or worse, if human nature took full control. We have only given dry facts, we have not even really discussed these currents in philosophy, and thus religion. I think the Cathars are already so well known that there is no need to mention them. The famous French music group era returned them to their place. Montségur, it's a military strategy to this day. Yeah, kill everyone, God will recognize his own, that's when. If anyone wants to, can explore the topic. But not from just any books, but actually written by university lecturers, theologians of religions, not sects. We don't have time for that here, but it's Luciferian Verses. How could it not be? Nothing about Lilith, much less about the one who is still an angel of justice. Lucifer is a difficult subject, but without Lucifer there is no religion in any way related to the Western world and of course the Middle East. You can throw these cauldron into myth as well. More of them in art than in dogma. At least they're not there. This topic was supposed to come up much later, but a few days ago, due to the arrival of the icon, the city went crazy and I had the opportunity to listen to an interesting homily, at which the local parish priest grabbed his head. A homily to the kids about how they're going to end up in cauldrons. And how terrible, awful, will be there. It's a wonder the children didn't start crying. It's amazing that still someone really continues to haunt by hell, which has nothing to do with the biblical hell. Yes, but he was a high-ranking priest and the parish priest couldn't tell him to shut up, even though he was boiling. Probably the wisest thing ever said about hell about Imperator Kak Sao. Hell is one point of view. Paradise or hell? It's a matter of attitude. If you want something too much you create your own hell. It would be easier not to want anything, but that's not human natura. Hell contains paradise, and paradise contains hell. You yourself measure your desires. Certainly, the famous saying of Emperor Cao Cao, "In today's world it is better to hurt than to be hurt," applies again today. The dialogue with General Lee is also famous. You can't rely on people, only on truth and rigor. But when people are ignoble, how to make the law? With such hatred there is no nobility. Won't 20,000 dead breed even more hate? Is the lowest possible price. So we begin to talk about the greater good. Then, there is light in the darkness too. But it is. There is life in the dark. No, better or worse, but it's there. There are also dreams in the darkness. Even demons dream. About salvation. If they wouldn't dream, then salvation wouldn't make sense either. Not the one from the movie, but actually a reworked Buddhist verse.